Hey everybody, it's Alycia. Welcome back to Tears at the Table, where we talk to women about how they discovered their calling. Today, I have a really good friend and a leader here in the community here in Milwaukee. Her name is Rachel Schepp, and she is joining us to talk about her journey and her life. I am going to let her tell you a little bit more about herself.
Thank you, Alicia. I'm happy to be here. This is real exciting. Can't wait to watch all the future podcasts of other women talking about these same issues. So my name is Rachel Schepp. I am the executive director at CareNet Pregnancy Center of Milwaukee. We're a pregnancy resource center here in the city. So I grew up in the city of Milwaukee, well, a suburb of Milwaukee, just south, and grew up in a very close-knit family. And I loved playing softball. That was a big part of who I was. I went to a school called Winona State University and majored in criminal justice. And I played softball there too. And that again was a major part of my identity. I ended up meeting my husband when I was doing an internship at the Milwaukee County Jail. So it was an internship for school. And I always like to joke that we met in jail because he was working in the jail, the county jail. I was doing an internship and we met, and we both actually had gone to Winona State and didn't know each other there, but met back here in Milwaukee in the jail. And we started dating and finished off college. And that's kind of my beginning growing up years, but that's a little bit maybe of my background in history.
That's really cool. I didn't know about the gel part. I think that's a really cute story. For those who don't know, a little bit of Rachel and I's backstory is we both worked with pregnant women a lot in Milwaukee. And I lived as a teenager in Milwaukee as well. So we both experienced the different neighborhoods, which is why she clarified that. And just the journey that I'll leave for you all to research on your own. And you talked about you and your husband meeting at the jail during an internship. So you started working as a lawyer originally and went to school for that. Can you share what inspired you to become a lawyer?
Beginning in high school, I saw in myself the fact that I loved picking apart arguments and really thinking thoroughly and logically about things, and not wanting to back down when I didn't understand something. So just asking lots of questions and being interested in seeing things through and really understanding things. But honestly, in high school, I didn't know a single lawyer. So I didn't ever think I want to be a lawyer. I just thought, I don't know, I wanted to be a teacher for a while and I just wasn't sure what I wanted to do. And then probably my junior year in high school, I had a teacher who did go to law school and was now a teacher. And she kind of showed me what that looked like to go to law school. And she encouraged me to be part of mock trial. So then I got to see what that was like to put together arguments and prepare witnesses and do things like that. And that really, coupled with a good friend of mine who just said, Rachel, go for it. You could be a lawyer. Why not? Why can't you do it if everyone else can do it? And I thought, yeah, I could do that. And so I entered college thinking that I was going to go to law school. And that's why I had the criminal justice degree, just thinking that would be a good base of knowledge to go on to law school. But that's really kind of how I decided to become a lawyer.
That's really cool. I actually didn't know all that backstory either. And yes, that is super important with law to have that logic, that follow through and commitment, especially with seeing cases through to the end. And for me, that actually adds a lot of clarity to my next question. Honestly, why you're perfect for your position you're in now. So that question is, how did you go from law to ending up as an executive director in a pregnancy center?
So I practiced law for about 10 years total after graduation. And I was in a big firm doing like lawsuits, litigation. I did work and do some school law, but it was, it's high pressure, high stress, a lot of work. And I had two kids. And after I had my second child, I stayed home for about a year. And at that point in time was deciding, do I go back into the practice of law or not? And I really did feel like I should go back. But God was also tugging at my heart at that point in time to say, don't just go back and make money and bill your hours and, do that whole gig again. It was like, you can do that, but also see how God can use your skills to bless other people. So I thought, as I was re-entering the workforce after my second child, I went back to my law firm. I also looked for ways to volunteer, which was honestly kind of counterintuitive because I was already having the two kids and going back to work. And I thought, I don't have time to volunteer. But I just felt like that's what God was saying. Like, if you're going to go back and put your career as one of your priorities, then you should make room for other priorities as well. And so I found time, and my husband was great with that. And the kids were little, and I volunteered at CareNet. So I became a part of the board as an attorney. That, boards always want attorneys on their boards because it helps. And so I volunteered my time and worked as a volunteer here for about 3-4 years. And that really got me interested in pregnancy center ministry. So working, volunteering at CareNet and then working at the law firm, I just started to see the differences and see how I could use my skills at the nonprofit level. And it just really felt called into that ministry. And ultimately there was a space open at this pregnancy center. And it's kind of a long story, and I don't want to go into, too much detail, because the end result is I really felt God calling me. And it took a leap of faith, because there's a huge financial repercussions from leaving the private practice of law to be the leader of at the time, small nonprofit. We've since grown, but at the time it was very small. But it just felt right. And my husband was on board. And at that time, the kids were, elementary aged, and they were excited. And we just kind of looked at it as a family decision.
I think that's really cool. And knowing that from the perspective of coming in I've been an executive director of a center too. Having that law background is so helpful, because it really is a lot of logic, follow through, unexpected situations. And for those who don't know, Rachel will elaborate in a second what a pregnancy center is, but law really does work well with that. And what you were saying is funny, because every time I talk to someone in the pro-life movement, it's that same story. People are like, that was your lifelong dream and calling. And you're like, no, one day I slipped on the sidewalk, got in an accident. That's how the pro-life movement feels. It's like I fell in and knew God's hand was in it. And especially like you talking about financially, every time I hear that, I've never met someone who said, I am in this for the money, because it's not the right place to get in it for the money, but it is the right place to see God provide and to see him show up and see him take what you've been given and your talents and skills and really build up unborn lives, which is so close to his heart. So I think there's an abundance of favor present over the entire movement. And that adds into your life when you choose to be obedient with that. I will let you explain now what is a pregnancy center, because people actually might not know that and how it impacts women's lives.
Well, first of all, that was so well said, Alycia. That's amazing. So a pregnancy center serves women who are facing an unexpected pregnancy. We provide free pregnancy testing and ultrasounds, and we provide options counseling to women. So a lot of the women that come to us don't necessarily want to be pregnant or weren't planning on it. And so about 70% of the women that walk through our doors are undecided if they're going to continue the pregnancy or not. And so we want to provide support and encouragement to them, showing them all that we have to offer if they do choose life. So we, give out free supplies. We have free classes. We provide lots of community resources. We really just want to support and encourage moms and let them know they're not alone. And we also do offer free post-abortion counseling for those that don't choose life and are struggling with that decision. Our focus here at the pregnancy center is on the mom, and we want to encourage and support that mom and let her know that she is loved and valued by God, and that we are that tangible hands and feet of Christ to her.
I really like how you said that, because especially when people hear pro-choice, pro-life, there's always this argument you hear of pro-choice is for the mom, pro-life is for the baby. And for those who don't know, I can't remember if I said it earlier, Rachel's at CareNet Milwaukee, and CareNet is a national organization with pregnancy centers all over the country. And a lot of people hear this argument about abortion and the stigma that says pregnancy centers are just trying to rope you in for an ultrasound, and they're trying to force you to have a baby, and then they leave. But I don't know if you fully heard like what Rachel was saying, but that's not what they do. and they're more of the silent majority. You're not really going to see Rachel on stage that much or out in the community everywhere as much as you're going to see her if you're a mom in need, because they're working with those moms. So they're not involved in the politics, the law, actually, in all of those areas. They're on the ground working. And there's just as many and actually more pregnancy centers than there are Planned Parenthoods. And they're the ones that'll stay there. Like, I know I've worked with Rachel before, and we've had kids that were up to 3 years old where they're still helping the mom. So they're really in it for both the mom and the baby, which is the best place to be. So it's a really cool ministry. And I think Rachel really went to bat for saying, like, they're really there for the women and they are there for a long time.
Yeah, and people can tell if that's not the case. If you don't really care about that woman and you have a different agenda, you're not going to make an impact. That woman's going to walk out the door and say, well, what do I care what these people think? That's my decision. And it is her decision. And we want her to know that she's empowered to have all the choices available to her, that she doesn't have to ever feel like she has to choose abortion because she has no support.
I absolutely agree with that 100%. And as we're talking about all this, we have something interesting going on here in the state of Wisconsin in the United States specifically, that this was perfect timing for your interview, because I am curious from a legal standpoint what your understanding is. Right now, Planned Parenthood started doing abortions again as of last Monday. So they said that an old law here in Wisconsin from 1849, I believe it was, had a ban that banned abortion. Well, there was a lawsuit, and so everything seems to be up in the air from what I can understand. And so Planned Parenthood said, the law's unclear. Let's all do abortions again. And they did. So what are your thoughts right now about Wisconsin's unsure abortion laws?
Yeah, it's very interesting, especially with the legal background that I have, to be in this space at this time, because it's constantly changing. It makes it very interesting and a little anxiety producing. But what I would say is, first of all, as you mentioned, CareNet is not a political organization. CareNet Milwaukee, like, we don't lobby for these changes in laws. We don't take a stand on what we think the interpretation should be. We don't file briefs with the court, things like that. But this is my understanding of where things stand, because we do get asked and we do have to understand. So, after Roe v. Wade was overturned, it was left up to the states for what abortion restrictions there's going to be. Wisconsin had a law in place that said that any person other than the mother who intentionally destroys the life of an unborn child is guilty of a Class H felony. So basically, the way this law was drafted in the 1800s, it's my understanding, and I believe that the law was written this way so that a mother who has an abortion would never be prosecuted for having the abortion, but the abortionist who performs it, the doctor who performs the abortion, would be liable. So it says any person other than the mother who intentionally destroys the life of a child, meaning abortion. So this would prevent doctors from performing abortions while never putting a mom at risk of going to jail for having the abortion. So that was kind of the balance that was struck in that law. But what happened was a Dane County Circuit Court interpreted that law to mean that when it says any person other than the mother, and they interpreted that to mean the mother can choose to have an abortion, and that is not illegal, that the mother has the right to choose an abortion, and therefore women can choose to have an elective abortion. What they say the law was trying to prevent was somebody forcing someone to have an abortion against their will, or like somebody harming the mom in such a way that she loses her baby.
Yeah.
And then that would be a violation of this law. So they really narrowed the focus of the law and interpreted it in a way that allows elective abortions. And so that is going to be appealed. Right now, that's just one circuit court's decision, but Planned Parenthood latched onto that and said, like what you were saying, Alycia, the law is unclear, or no, it's not unclear. It allows this. And they are therefore moving forward with providing abortions in the state of Wisconsin. Now it's going to be appealed to the Court of Appeals and obviously up to the Supreme Court. We have a liberal majority on the Supreme Court, so chances are in some way, shape, or form that's going to be upheld, and Planned Parenthood will continue to be allowed to perform abortions. There are some restrictions that are applicable in Wisconsin right now, and that's that you can't have abortions after viability. So after 22 weeks, they're not available unless there's a health risk to the mother. And you do have to wait 24 hours. So you have to have 2 appointments to get the abortion. You have to have an ultrasound. So there are some of these restrictions or safeguards in place, but that's really the status of where things are right now, which is not real clear, but that's where they are.
I really appreciate you elaborating on that, because that makes a lot more sense, actually, because a lot of people are struggling with, so where does it stop? And where, like with the 22 mark, they're like, is it 9 months now? Because everything's unclear. So there's just a lot of confusion, because you really did break that down well from a legal standpoint, but most of us aren't lawyers, and most women are in poverty are definitely not going to understand all of that legislation, which really, from all political aspects, they really have to take that step back and say, are we really considering these women? Because they're not even understanding what we're doing. And are we advocating for them, or are we having a political argument right now? And so I think it's a very dangerous spot to be in. It's really hard, because then, like, understanding from a business aspect, where do I stand on this? I'm not sure, because that could change tomorrow. And it literally could. It's a lot of upheaval, which it's really cool to have you right now, because a lot of people assumed a lot more with Roe versus Wade getting overturned. They're like, okay, abortion's illegal across the United States. That's not actually what happened. It went into the state hands, which we went almost immediately into that abortion is banned because of this old law. And now they're starting to sort things out now with this old law. But that's one of the things we've been doing here at Tirza, is breaking down those statistics in each state, so women can understand. Like you talked about, Karen, it does show all the options. It's saying abortion is an option in this state. It is not in this state. So it just gets really confusing and unfair to women everywhere, really, and society, when we start arguing haphazardly over when a baby's viable, when a law is acceptable. And it unfortunately creates a lot of unnecessary chaos.
And it's really sad if you think about it, that a human life is protected in one state if it's 16 weeks old, and in another state if it's 28 weeks, and another state if it's 35. You don't know state to state, and that doesn't seem just or fair to that unborn child, that their survival is dependent on what state borders am I within.
I absolutely agree. And that comes back to the whole thing, because Tirza is a Christian ministry, where that goes back to the Imago Dei. Do we really value, as Christ followers, life? That God created all life, and trust that even in the instance of an unplanned pregnancy, God created that life. He allowed it to happen. So can we say for ourselves and make that own judgment call and say, this life is no longer worth having, simply because it's not the right time or the right understanding for me? And I think that's something that's really important in this whole issue for every Christian to understand, is Imago Dei trumps everything. We really don't get a say in that if we're following Christ. Because we're getting short on time and we've gotten into a lot of legal stuff there, I have a final question for you that we ask everyone, which is, what advice would you have for a girl who doesn't know what her calling is?
I would say, look at your interests and passions, and then compare that and contrast that with what your abilities are, and see where they align. If you can find that sweet spot where you're passionate about something and you have some kind of ability or special work that you can do in that area, I feel like that is a calling. Just combining what you're interested in with what you're good at and finding that spot. And it might not be that it's a full-time job. It might be that it's something that you volunteer at, something that you work behind the scenes at, but it's just something that God is calling you to based on what he's gifted you with and what he's put in your heart as a passion.
I really like that. And I agree. That's something that I've discovered in my own life is most positions which happen to you that I've ended up in life has happened because of serving someone else. So when I went and served someone else's vision, God gave me vision or clarity for my own life. And in your case, you ended up in charge of a pregnancy center. For me, I ended up in charge of this ministry, actually. I simply stepped into it serving, and then the entire thing was given to me. So it really does start, I agree, with just serve. And I like how you said, serve somewhere you're passionate about and where you're like, I could get really excited about that. It doesn't mean you're committed to it or you have to do it for the rest of your life, but you don't know what doors will open unless you try. And Rachel, do you have any last words for us before we close?
I just think this is a great podcast. And I think I would love to listen to hear how everyone else answers that last question in moving forward in the future, because I feel like you can never stop learning. So I'm excited to see what others say as well.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. And it's been really fun having you. It's very fun to get to chat with a friend.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for coming. And everyone have a great evening. And we will see you next month for our next guest.